right. ¿Qué hubo, everybody? This is Nuestra Palabra Latino Writers Have Their Say. I am your guest host, Rodrigo Bravo Jr., filling in for Tony Diaz, El Libro Traficante, and author of the book, The Tip of the Pyramid, Cultivating Community Cultural Capital. And even though Tony may not be here, ya sabes que le damos esquina al Libro Traficante, and we continue talking about cultivating community cultural capital. We, of course, want to thank all of our listeners. Now, you might be listening first via our live stream where we broadcast to various social media platforms like YouTube or Facebook. This video will also appear on fox26houston.com. We appreciate our allies there who promote our work. And then, of course, we have the audio version, which happens on our first platform, 90.1 KPFT FM. And, of course, I have to pause here and remind our listeners that we hope that you can budget a donation to KPFT in the name of Nuestra Palabra, Latino Writers Have Their Say, so that we can do our part to keep this great experiment in freedom of speech going. We want to make sure that we can always put together shows like this, our terms on our terms. Of course, we are high-stake Aztecs, or in my case, Wi-Fi Chichimecas. So there's also a version that will appear on your favorite podcast streaming platform like Spotify, Apple, or Google. You can also find all of our past episodes there as well. Today, we have a fantastic show lined up for you. Really excited to bring on Cat Alvarado. She is a Nicaraguan-American comedian who turned her journey as a Latina misfit into award-winning one-woman show in a comedy special, Off-White, that is available right now on your favorite streaming platform. I heard it. It's hilarious. Cat, thank you so much for being here with us. First of all, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic today. Thank you so much. It's a lovely holiday weekend.
It must be a lovely holiday weekend for you because, of course, your new album just came out on the 26th. I'm sure everybody's just telling you, hey, I listened to it. It must be exciting to have your debut album out there on the platforms.
Oh, absolutely. I got a message just yesterday morning from mom with an autistic child who was like, my son is a huge fan of yours. Can you please send me an autograph photo? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time someone has asked me to send them that. That is so sweet. So it's really nice to hear that feedback.
That is fantastic. That's fantastic. Let me go ahead and continue with your bio, just so that people
Oh, thank
know
you.
that you have done some great things out there. Kat has performed at the Laughing Skull Lounge Festival and the Big Pine Comedy Festival. She also premiered her hour at the 2022 Hollywood Fringe Festival to rave reviews, winning a Producer's Encore Award. She's also a featured comedian at the 2022 Great American Comedy Festival. She also made her TV stand-up debut on PBS's First Nations Comedy Experience in 2018. She's also the creator and host of the Villains of History podcast, a co-host of the Unofficial Official Story podcast, and a frequent guest co-host on YouTube's Real Rejects. Her debut comedy album, Off-White, was released on May 26th on Blonde Medicine and everywhere the comedy albums are streamed or sold. You should check it out. And she's also going to have a tour coming up pretty soon. In fact, she'll be here touring in Texas this summer. So super excited. One more time, saludos y bienvenidos a Cat Alvarado.
Hey, thank you.
That's my version of the air horn. I apologize. So, Kat, very exciting that you have your debut album out there. Tell us a little bit about coming up with a debut album. I know that it's an exciting process, but it also has to be some of the most nerve-wracking moments in your life to come up with a debut album and, come up with the concepts, the bits, and all that stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my debut comedy album is kind of a culmination of all of the jokes I've written over the last 10 years that I've been doing stand-up comedy. And I always knew the general shape of the album in terms of the through line that it would involve me finding myself and my journey through my 20s. But I didn't know the theme of it because that's really high level. That's a very general kind of term, like, oh, it's about my 20s. But really, what is the crux? What's the meat and potatoes? What is the message of the album? And, I had so many jokes, over an hour of jokes I had written over the last 10 years. And coming up with the album in the last year or so, it was a matter of finding how they fit together and what resonated in my heart as the real, center. What was the heart of the album? And then making sure that my jokes showed that it executed on that center of the album, and that meant sometimes like removing ones that I thought like, oh, I love this one, but it doesn't go. I love this one, it doesn't go, but these go in there. I don't love them as much, but when I put them in the context of the bigger album, it makes it so much better. And I remember even just towards the end, in the last weeks before I recorded, like just taking out a whole chunk of like 10 minutes and then rewriting it in under 2 weeks, because it needed to match what the rest of it was.
Mm.
And in my heart, I was like, oh, what's currently in that space? It isn't matching. Um, so it was like down to the wire. I mean, the night before, still going out, doing sets, polishing those jokes. It was a lot. I was so wiped out after I recorded it that I just like didn't do stand up for a month. I'm like, I just want to eat pancakes every day.
That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. I think people have a big misconception, even myself, before I got to know some of the comedians in my circle, that it was just easy, that you would just get up there and tell a few jokes and ha 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 ha. It is not that way at all. And I'm glad you're describing that process, because that misconception that you just get up there, it really kind of takes away from the hard work, the diligence that you say, and also kind of putting everything together. Having these this story, kind of this arc in your album. And I noticed that as well, that these jokes, it wasn't just random jokes here and there. There's kind of a trajectory here where you were talking about growing up and going through your 20s and the different kind of scenarios that you had. Tell us a little bit more about what came about to make the album, first of all, because you've been doing stand up for a while. You've gotten, some great acclaim. You've gone to these festivals. What really led you to say, you know what? I can do this. I can do a comedy album, my debut comedy album. I can make it happen. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I know that there's a lot of Latinas out there that want to get into comedy, but maybe don't know how, and they don't see a lot of people like yourself, like themselves. And they say, well, how can I do it?
Oh, that's a great question. So let's say you're a person who's never done comedy before and you want to start. The first thing you want to do is get yourself to an open mic. Honestly, just get to that open mic and do it. Try it. See how it goes. And you work on writing that first 5 minutes of material. And once you have a good 5 minutes, you can start getting on a few more shows if people like you. And then you build it from there. But it was a long journey before actually doing a whole comedy album, because I had to, take my licks, take my hits, do a lot of shows that were like crappy, crummy shows. Some shows are really great shows, and really build and build and build that skill. And, I've had an hour of material for a while. It's been, probably 3-4 years that I've been able to do, that full length hour. But to have it be ready for an album is a whole other level. It takes not just being able to write a joke or writing 60 minutes worth of jokes, but the ability to say, okay, I want a message, and I'm going to make sure I'm writing towards that message or that idea that I want to convey and leave behind. Because I think there's another level of writing that's different from when you're just doing a bunch of live shows. A bunch of live shows, people see it and it's done in the moment and they had a great time, and they go home, they go, gosh, gee, that was fun. An album you leave behind that people can always go back to, and it's on your name. So it takes a little bit more intention when you go about doing an album. And about how I came about actually getting a record label. That's networking, baby. It's being good, having the talent, and knowing the right person who knows the right person, and then having the record label say yes. that's that's kind of the crux of it.
That's great. No, and that's I love the way you said that. It does take years. You've had an hour of material for a long time, but it's not
Mhm.
just getting over there and getting it done. It takes time and perseverance.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had several friends who I know here in LA who they get a half hour together or an hour together, and then they decide they're going to shoot a special, and they'll spend like $2,000, more than that. They'll spend 4 or 5 thousand, all the money it needs to rent the like proper equipment to make a high quality special, but they're like 3 years into comedy, and they do that, and I've tried to be like, hey, hun, calm down, like maybe you're not ready yet. And people and their egos, and they'll still do it, and then they do it, they put it out there, and it doesn't go anywhere. You don't want to spend all that effort and resource on doing something when you're not ready yet, but a lot of times people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear. They want it now, now, now. And there's a lot of people putting specials onto YouTube, and they're hoping that it'll go viral. But it's like, if you haven't put in the years and you don't have the ability, there's no shortcuts.
I love that you mentioned that because it does take some time. It does take effort, and it's not something you can just jump into. And it's really important that people understand that, especially because the amount of work that it takes to create the album. So let's talk a little bit about the album itself and some of the tracks that you have on there. And I really want to delve into the topic of identity, okay?
Yeah.
Because you really did talk about that, and I think one of the things that I can appreciate of the album was you put it front and center. You let people know, like, hey, we're going to talk about this. We're going to take some jokes about it, but there's also some realness behind that. I felt, for example, when I was listening to you talk about being Nicaraguan, and then the whole, it's a whole nother country. It's not Mexico combined. Let's talk about a little bit about that because there is kind of a homogenization that occurs sometimes where maybe people think everybody that is brown is Mexican, and that's obviously not the case. And I look, I put my hands up. I was one of those from San Antonio where we all think that we're all Mexican, that there's very other Latinos or whatnot. Tell us a little bit more about that particular joke, but also kind of the realness behind that joke, because I think people need to know about that.
Yeah, sure, that joke. Oh my God, I love that one because I do have family in Texas, but it's on my white side, right? And and like, oh yeah, who cares? It's all just Mexico. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, we have different music, different stories, and I love the one I highlight in my album is about La Mojuana. That's an urban legend. And of course, you guys know about La Llorona, right? She's a ghost lady. She drowned her kids. Now she's coming to get yours. Spooky, spooky. And we have ours. Her name's La Mojuana, and she was an indigenous princess who fell in love with a Spaniard. And then he stole all her gold and he locked her in a cave like that. She was like the daughter of the chief of the indigenous tribe. He locked her in the cave after getting her pregnant in the real one. She was pregnant. He locks her in the cave, takes all the gold, stabs her, she dies. And now she haunts the roads of Nicaragua, making men crash their cars if they cheat on their wives. And, and all the men in my family have seen her. And that's the joke. That's the joke. And now I don't know if she actually haunts men who cheat on their wives, but definitely men who have wronged a woman for sure, because she's, and that includes, right, cheaters. But that's who she shows up to a lot. And for sure, my grandfather was one of those, and my uncle and my cousin. So,
I love that. I love that portion of the skit, but you also go into kind of the identity and the
yeah.
kind of the interactions between Latinos themselves,
Mm.
and your friends, how they also said like, hey, I go ziplining where you're from, and you're like, no, that's somewhere else.
Yeah, oh my God. Whenever I talk to white people at Nicaragua, the first thing they want to bring up is like surfing and zip lining. Like, oh yeah, that's where I took my jungle vacation. Like, okay. Oh, that's the cheaper version of Costa Rica, right? That's just the Groupon. Well, Nicaragua is just the Kirkland signature Costa Rica, basically. I'm like, thanks. Okay.
How do I take that, right?
I know, right? Like, and then, what I experienced growing up, especially, as a kid in Los Angeles, where a lot of the Latino population is also Mexican, just like Texas, was kind of like, you're not really Latina, also because I'm light. So they're like, oh, you're just a white girl. I bet you listen to country music. Like, they just wanted nothing to do with me except for the nerds. Shout out to nerds. Because like the anime Latinos, they were my buddies. They're like, you're a Latina, because I was a dorky nerd. I had a back brace and braces. They're like, we have more solidarity being outcast nerds than we had as Latinos, to be honest. But definitely wasn't one of the popular kids among the Latinos. But what I did notice is that as much as there was some isolation and they're kind of like, oh, you're not one of us when I was younger, the older I got, when I went to college, I talked about going to UC Santa Barbara for graduate school. When we realized we Latinos were such a small minority in these groups, in these circles, like there was only one other Latino kid in my grad school program. That's when the Mexican versus Nicaraguan versus Puerto Rican, all that went out of the way. It was like, oh, it's us. And suddenly the things we had in common mattered more than the things that were different about us. And I
Mm.
shout out to my buddy Bert, Alberto Ramon. He now lives in DC, but he is from um, Laredo, Texas. Um, Shout out to him. He was my buddy in grad school. We were the only two Latinos in the program, and we are like, "Hi, what's up? We made it!" and that bond made us friends. Like of all the people who I went to school with back then, he's the one I've kept in touch with. I barely keep in touch with anybody else, but it was that bond of being Latino that made us friends. And really, I've seen that more and more the older I get, and in the community of comedy as well. It is less of a us versus them, Mexicans versus everyone else thing. There is way more community. It's us Latinos bringing each other up, right? Showing the world that Latino comedy is comedy for everybody. We have the same family values as everybody else, and we can laugh at that. I have a mom, you have a mom. Like we all got moms. Let's laugh at that. Let's laugh at our family trauma and pain and that stuff that we all share, whether you're black or white or Mexican, Nicaraguan or Asian. We all have that. We're people. And it's been really fun, especially in the Los Angeles community. And the comedy world hasn't always been like that. I think I've seen a big shift in the culture, especially among Latino comedians. I don't know if you saw the George Lopez Ralph Barbosa thing a couple months ago, where George Lopez dissed another comic, a young comic who's coming up. And what I've heard is that back in the day, George Lopez wouldn't let other Latinos be on a lineup with him, and as a result, like it kept the rest of the Latino community from coming up because he could have brought people along, right? And when
Mm.
you look at other groups, you look at um, black comics, you look at white comics, they're bringing their own people along all the time. You see black comics on tour with each other, white comics on tour with each other, but George didn't do it, right? And he even blocked certain other comics, like, oh, if you can't, if you book me, then you can't book this other Latino comic at your casino or whatever. So he kept people from having opportunities. And it's so wonderful to see the change in the culture where now um, I am getting opportunities because my Latino comedy friends got opportunities. And they said to their producers who they knew or to their agents who they knew, hey, you know who else you should check out? This really great Latina comic, Cat Alvarado. You should hear her stuff. And I am so grateful for that community that I finally got to have as an adult. But it kind of took everybody shifting perspective from fighting each other to realizing it's kind of us against the world, and we are who we like. We need to be there for each other as Latinos, not against each other or infighting.
What a beautiful way to end that, because you're absolutely right. We should be sticking to each other instead of finding differences and kind of creating these divisions. And I'm really happy that you brought that up actually regarding George Lopez and Ralph Barbosa, because that was kind of another question that I had for you, especially as a Latina. Yeah, I mean, you're not just a Latino comic or a Latinx comic or whatnot. You're a Latina comic, and I'm
Mhm.
imagining that must have been even harder for you to really kind of get out there and set yourself apart from everybody, and really maybe even having people take you seriously. Was that ever an issue?
Oh,
Go.
it still is an issue. It
Mm.
absolutely is an issue. And while there are some Latino, male comics who are friends near and dear to my heart, I still see, and you'll see it, and I won't say the names because I don't want to start beef with anybody. I don't like beef. I am strictly vegetarian in that respect. I like to keep it positive. But there are some groups of male Latino comics, and you can keep your eyes out where you'll see time and time again, this lineup is all men. Why is this tour all men? This is all men. And there's a show in LA that they've been doing, and every lineup seems to be like all men. They've had Ida Rodriguez on like once, and I think they had Angela Johnson once, but then you'll see like a Latino open micer, and I'm like, okay, look at the standard you guys have. I have to have an HBO special if I'm a Latino woman, but if I'm a guy, I could just walk in from a bar. Hmm, hmm.
Mm, mm, mm,
But
mm.
when I bring it up, they deny, deny, deny. They're like, "Oh, that's not it. Like, you just need to come hang out. You just need to come say hello to us." And it's like, that's not how you treat professional comedians. And professional comedians, like, you book people like, you know, like, I don't think Ada Rodriguez is going to go have a drink on a Thursday to schmooze to get her gig. Did you call Ada? Yeah, you called Ada. You talked to her manager. You booked her. Book me. I'm a professional too.
Hmm.
Um, there's guys who are just not taking us seriously. So there's definitely a boys club within the Latino comedy world. So I'm kind of almost going at it alone, like, kind of just trying so hard, and I have to, like, really be that positive and that friendly. Like, the positivity, oh my god, that's such a big thing, because you cannot afford to have any enemies in this business.
Wow. Yeah, and so and we see that quite often in a lot of the industries and books and writings and poetry and all that, where there are spaces that are created for Latinos, Latinx, but somehow, some way, Latinas kind of get left behind sometimes, you know. And so Tony is definitely a champion for making sure that we have an inclusive show and making sure that we get everybody, you know, from all types of folks to be on the show. And so we were really happy to get in touch with your people and bring you on, because it is a big deal. It is a really important thing to make sure that we support our Latino, Latina, Latinx folks that are out there making it, you know, and doing big things, because a debut comedy album is a big thing, Kat.
Thank
And
you so
really,
much.
again, congratulations on that. And I just want to remind folks, we're talking to Cat Alvarado, whose debut comedy album, Off White, was released on May 26th on Blonde Medicine. Please stream it. Go on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, whatever your streaming platform of choice is. Get out there and listen to it. It's a great album right there. You're going to get a lot out of it. Also want to mention, we were talking about identity right now, but you also mentioned a little bit about, you know, growing up. I kind of got this religious tone out of it, you know, where certain parts is like you moved because of that. And I know, because as I guess my mom would say, a lapsed Catholic. I guess that's where I am. You know that you know, I get that, right? I too was married very young. I married very young, and I get divorced very young. And you know, it just is kind of this trajectory that often we get caught up in, because, well, you know, just you trying to do the right thing, or you know, you grow up a certain way thinking that, hey, this is what's supposed to happen, and so forth. Tell us a little bit more about that, because you did touch on it in several of your jokes. Pretty funny stuff that you had on there, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and that's something I definitely plan to write about more. I think I want to expand on that aspect of my journey a lot more in my next album, or who knows, special. But yeah, so I did get married at 19, largely because of, I would say, purity culture, just the idea, and it's really big in Texas. So I'm told, and in the South, you know, that general idea that you have to save yourself for marriage, and that sex is a dirty, gross thing, and, you know, shame on you if you do it. And so, of course, I, as a natural, you know, teenager, I wanted to be physically intimate with somebody, but religion said I would go to hell if I did that. And so the natural response to that as a human was to find the first person willing to marry me also. And I did. I found someone at church, and we did that. But that's not exactly how you should be making a decision for who to spend the rest of your life with. I think that's a like, you don't go decide, like, you're not like, oh, I really need to buy a house, let me close my eyes and just pick the first one that I land on. That's not how you buy a house. So why would you choose the person you're going to spend basically 24/7 of the rest of your life like that? um so that's pretty much what happened to me. I made a choice, and honestly, and I hope he's out there living an awesome, fantastic life. I'm sure he's a much better person now, because we're both 30 something. That's very different from being 19 years old. But Lord knows, at 19, no one's ready to get married. Like, at 19, we can hardly be good roommates. Like, everybody's got horrifying roommate stories, and that's essentially what I got, except for with the marital paperwork and a divorce on my record. He was just a really bad roommate.
I, I absolutely agree with you. I have two boys that are 22 and 18, and you mentioned earlier about cosplay, anime. They are big nerds, so they love going to the conventions. I tell them all the time, just do that right now. Just focus on that.
Yeah.
Don't focus on anything else, like, you know, like love or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so much better to kind of build your life and be able to have something you bring to the table for someone else. rather than, come to the table with nothing. Because you never know. Some people, it takes them a lot longer to get their life together. And hey, there's no shame in that. But it always sucks to be the one person who gets further in life at a faster pace and the other person is dragging, and that can just cause a lot of resentment and frustration. Like right now I'm dating somebody where we're like really compatible, we're like right at the same point in life, where we're like a power couple, and that is so amazing to have. I would have loved to have had that. I wish that for everybody, where you're just like right there, right at the level. You're like, hey, let's build something together. When you're 19, you got nothing to build with.
Totally agree with it. Only thing you should be worried about is building your credit, right? Just
Yeah.
slowly but surely pay the bills and whatnot. That's great to hear, Kat. Whenever you do, are with somebody or whatnot, that you kind of match, that energy, and you're able to build on that. And kind of that's the way the album is also doing. It's building on the jokes that you have from the beginning all the way towards the end. Tell us a little bit more about maybe how maybe how the album came about, because from my understanding, everything that I read, it seemed the album was filmed during COVID. Is that correct? During
It
the
was
pandemic?
recorded actually just last December.
Okay. Oh, okay, okay, okay.
So very end of COVID.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um, yeah. But how it came about, with respect to recording it, or with respect to the
I,
content?
I I guess my question, and I should have framed it better, but my question was, I saw that, like, you had a lot of momentum going towards 2020, and then
Hmm.
COVID happened, and I wanted to see how maybe that affected your journey and your trajectory as a comedian and maybe your professional buildup. Because I noticed when I was reading your bio and getting to know a little bit more about you, I was like, man, she just had this trajectory. You had this nice little buildup, and then it just stopped right there. And I was thinking maybe it was because of COVID or the pandemic.
I mean, yeah, I initially intended to record my album in 2020, at the end of
Mm.
2020. That was my goal. Like I remember I did an interview, I think Voyage LA, um, in 2019, and it was in early 2019, and I said in the interview I want to record my album at the end of 2020. And then of
Mm.
course it happened, and I had all these milestones too. I was like, oh, by the time I turn 30, I want to have a late night thing, and I want to do this and that. And I really did have quite a bit of momentum. Like I know I was taking meetings with like studios and stuff. It was wild to have all that, and to have it that early on, in my comedy career. And then yeah, COVID hit. There were no more shows. There were very few college gigs around to do, so I couldn't do those, and I just have to just go back to the grindstone and do Zoom, and just to keep the skills sharp. That's all I want, to just keep it sharp, keep it sharp, keep it sharp. But I'm really glad that all that happened, because um, I grew so much as a comic in the last 2 years, 3 years since 2020. Um, like I in the Zooms, I ended up doing a kind of almost like a workshop with a few other Los Angeles comics. Every Tuesday night, we do a Zoom comedy show for people, and they were such good writers, and I got to watch them and how they wrote and how they tweaked their jokes week after week. And when you see the same exact comics every single week tweaking their jokes, it kind of teaches you how to write your own jokes in a better way. And so I became better for that. Um, and and it challenged me to go out of my box and write more new jokes as well, because I got tired. I mean, we were all sick of everything in COVID. It was like so many days of sameness. So one of the few things I could change was to, hey, write some new stuff, take some risks. You can't just keep doing the same stuff over and over. So like I said earlier, that how I had an hour of comedy in 2018, 2019, that hour is very different from the hour I did for Off White, and it's way better than what it would have been if I recorded it in 2020 instead of 2022.
That's amazing, and I love the resourcefulness and the resiliency that you're displaying. It's something that us Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, we have to do, right? We can't just sit back and chill and just say like, okay, well, we'll just wait this out. It's like, no, we got to keep moving, we got to keep working,
Oh,
put it in.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the whole comedy community in LA, we're a bunch of hustlers. Like we like figured it out like a huevos, like just we were doing backyard comedy shows, secret comedy shows. I had a comedy show I would do in the forest. Like just, I got a PA that was battery powered, and I went into this kind of open space area of just like trees. It's the forest. I went into the forest. It's a hiking trail, and I went off to the side where there's like a little picnic bench with some other comedians, and we just did jokes at the hikers just as they were walking by. And then if they laughed, they would come and sit at the picnic table and listen for a little bit. Because we had to, we're like, how are we going to write new stuff? How are we going to try new jokes and keep on becoming better comics if we're not doing it? But there's no clubs. There were no open clubs to do it and practice our art. So like thank goodness for that. And we really came together too. It was everybody helping each other, like friends helping friends. Like, hey, I'm doing a thing in my backyard. You come over. You come over. Like, there were no gatekeepers. It was just friendship.
Oh, that's great to hear. Are there any hiking trails on your next tour in support of Off White?
No, not yet. But who knows? I wouldn't rule it out.
That might be something you might look into. We're talking to Cat Alvarado, debut comedy album Off White, released on May 26th. Please make sure you go out there and stream it on your favorite platform. Cat, I want to talk about another joke that you have in there that I love, contouring. I love the fact that you went straight at somebody, right there, just said like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about this." I really appreciate kind of the boldness and the assertiveness that you had in many of your jokes, working with the crowd as well. Not being afraid of kind of tackling, getting maybe even some feedback or some pushback from the audience. How does as a comedian and as a Latina comedian, how do you kind of work that in? Because that could be a little treacherous, I would imagine. Kind of working the crowd that way.
Well, that's the magic of crowd work. Can I tell you a secret?
Yes, please.
Most crowd work is fake. So it's like, it's actually news to me that joke was crowd work, because I've done it the exact same way over and over hundreds of times. But
Really?
that is the nature of it. And that is the art form, is to be able to have an interaction and kind of predict how it's going to go and say the things and make it seem every single time like it's the first time. That's it. And
Wow.
I'll always remember the first time I saw that, and that lesson landed with me. I saw Hannibal Buress twice in a week. Once in Santa Barbara, I bought tickets. I lived up there and I saw him do his hour. Then I came down on a Tuesday down to LA with some friends to go see a show over in West Hollywood. And Hannibal Buress dropped in and did another 15 minutes, but he did 15 that I had seen him do 2 days prior, including a joke where he goes, I think the WNBA should get, he says, what is it? He goes, I think teachers should make what WNBA players make. And he had that little chuckle right in between, like that setup and that punchline in that line.
Mm.
And when I heard it the first time, I was like, oh, it sounds like he's just like riffing. This guy is riffing off the top of his head. And then when I saw him do it on the Tuesday, he had that chuckle right in the middle of the punchline, as though it was an idea that was fresh in his mind. Huh. Wow. What a liar. But that made it, that give it a sparkle of newness, that we're like, oh my God, he's riffing. He's not riffing. He's not riffing. And neither was I in the contouring joke. I've done that hundreds of times. And I'm so excited to hear that it sounded like it was real crowd work. Yeah, and I've seen other comedians do it too. I mean, that's how I learned it, was seeing comics. When you do a comedy club, you do 4 nights with the same headliner. You watch them, you go, oh, he sets that up. What you do, you set something up, and the audience member usually will say the same thing every time, and you have your comeback, or you have the joke that you're leading into, and it really feels organic. I hope I'm not breaking down the magic too much, but in recording an album, that's going to be out there forever. I would never do something if I didn't know exactly what was about to happen and what I was about to say.
Wow, the magic is being revealed right here before y'all's eyes
Mhm.
of Nuestra
It's
Palabra.
it's not as treacherous as it seems.
Well, I again, it really when you do that, when you did that particular piece, I was really kind of like, wow, this. ballsy, if you will. You know what I'm saying? I was like, whoa, you know what's gonna happen? But no, you know what's gonna happen. So
It's not ballsy at all, not even a little. I have no balls. I'm 0%.
but so but one person that is ballsy is your mom. Now
Yes.
I am a fan of your mom on Instagram. When she comes out, it's constantly pushing you to get married, have kids, and do all this other stuff, right? And she actually makes an appearance there on the album, for I think at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
she makes a quick appearance. Tell us a little bit more about how that kind of came about. And I know that's not like a major part of the album, but it's part of your Instagram. And of course, we're gonna tell folks where they can follow you on all your social media channels so they can, check out your rest of your profiles and comedy and so forth. But tell us a little bit how about that came about.
So this is actually fun. The jokes on the album where my mom is in those jokes came before the Instagram character, actually. Um,
Really?
yeah.
Okay.
The first 5 minutes of comedy I ever wrote was entirely my mom. It was just me ripping on my mom. And honestly, it was a lot of trauma for me as a young woman that I was working through, just pissed at my mom, because she was always putting pressure on me as a Latina to have a more hot figure, like, oh, you should get breast implants. Mija, you need to gain more weight. Your chichis are gone. Your butt is gone. And then I would gain the weight. She'd be like, Mija, you look fat now. And I'm like, you told me to gain the weight. I just did what you said. You know, um, there were other aspects of things that I had problems with my mom because she was always like, the element of colorism in Latino culture, that my mom had wanted me to have blue eyes. And she had my sister, she was always like, ojalá que tenga ojos azules como su papá. And then she had my sister, and she's like, oh no, they came out verdes. Look, oh no, they're like olive. She's like, but it's okay, por lo menos no son oscuros como los de su hermana. And like I remember hearing that as like a little 7-year-old and being like so upset and like, well, does that make me ugly? I guess I'm ugly. I guess I'm ugly. And then my mom just picking on me, picking on my curly hair. Pareja negrita, uy, mira, uy. Just like hurtful shit. Just to know that things about me were not um desirable in her eyes. And so I started just picking on her back in my comment, just roasting her for just being a bimbo with big boobs and picking on me back. And um, there is something so healing about it through humor that I got to just, you know, get at her. Finally, like get revenge for all of them, like the fights. And mothers and daughters notorious, like mothers and daughters clash, man. And that's just part of nature. It's human nature. And like I had jokes about her having like big boobs and stuff like that. And then she saw it and she loved it. She wasn't mad at me at all, and she was proud of me. She's like, "That's so fun! It's so funny." And then eventually she's like, "Why don't you write more jokes about me?" And at that point, I was like, "Well, that takes it out. I want to fight. This isn't a fight anymore. You like it?" So I started writing jokes about other things, but she was really kind of like my first big topic was taking it out, like just ripping on my mom. And so I kept some of my favorite lines from that, and those went into the album. And then in 2020, when I was really bored trying to figure out stuff to do, I was like, you know what, let's play with these wigs. And I started doing the characters of my mom, and it came out. But after I had gotten all that anger out and frustration out in my material, a lot of that anger was gone. It's funny how expression and how art does that. It heals. I did it. I let it go, and suddenly I had peace. And my mom apologized too for all those things. As later she's like, "You're beautiful, and I love you, and I'm sorry that I made you feel bad about having your brown eyes." She goes, "Because I have brown eyes and brown hair and curls too. Like I look a lot like her." So everything when she was ripping on when she was being mean about those things, she was also more expressing things she felt about herself. You know.
Mm.
And so we made our peace, and so now when I write the jokes where I'm my mom's character, it's from a more lighthearted place. It's from a place that's healed and just ribbing her gently. And it's not jokes written in anger, you know, which it's funny. Like we can write from those two places. I definitely prefer to write from a place that's healed.
Well, I so appreciate you being vulnerable enough to share that because there's a lot of people that use art that way, but maybe don't, tell the truth about it. And the fact that you were able to share that with us right now, it really just tells us how sincere this art is for you. And it is, you're absolutely right. Our parents a lot of times pass down traumas to us because that's the way they parent, right? And one thing that I always kind of espouse is I practice grace over grievance with my dad as well, because my dad did his thing, and he only knew what he knew. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. And you made a brilliant observation right now, saying, "Hey, she was really just projecting. She
Mm-hmm.
was really kind of just she wasn't really talking to you. She was talking to a mirror, and kind
Yeah.
of expressing how she felt growing up."
Oh, absolutely. I have such memories of things that now in retrospect, it's her. It's all her pain. One time I remember being 15 and my mom had always dyed her own hair blonde as long as I can remember. And when she met my dad, she was dyeing her hair blonde. So he met her and married her and loved her as a blonde. And then when I was 15, I was like, Mom, dye your hair, be like me, be brown hair. And she did it. And then I remember overhearing a conversation between my parents, where he was like, "Oh, I like you better as a blonde. I'm not into you as a brunette." And it wasn't mean. He wasn't trying to be mean, and I don't think that was his intent. But my little 15-year-old ears heard that, and like I felt a pain from it. And I'm sure my mom felt like a little pain from it. We all felt that little moment, you know and and that flashed me back too to being 4 years old and to my mom like dyeing my hair blonde at age 4. Like, what does that say about her and the messages she received about what she should look like and what is the beauty ideal, to the point where you put chemicals on a 4-year-old's hair to make
Hmm.
her match that ideal, you know so there's a lot of trauma there. But comedy is a
Yeah.
wonderful way to heal it and to bring it out and to kind of mend those things. And now I understand as an adult, so much of the fighting was really just, everybody wrestling with their own demons.
What a beautiful way to kind of encapsulate that, Kat. Thank you so much for being with us. Before we start signing off and ending the show, though, tell us a little bit about where we can reach you. I know that a lot of people we've been pushing the album. Where can they reach you online? What's your Twitter handle, Instagram handle? Where would you prefer folks get to you?
Oh, yeah. So you can get to me on Instagram at the Cat Alvarado. That's CATALVARADO, Cat Alvarado. Or you can also get me on TikTok at Cat Alvarado Comedy, Twitter at the Cat Alvarado as well. I don't know why I just did those out of order. So, but there you go. So Instagram and Twitter at the Cat Alvarado, TikTok Cat Alvarado Comedy. You can find me there, and I will post all of my shows. You can see where I'm touring, where if I'll be in town. I am in Houston on July 20th, so I will see you then. I'll be at the Secret Group and also at the Elks Club down there.
All right, down in
Hmm.
Texas. All right.
Yay, Texas!
Fantastic. Well, Kat, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. We're so excited to really kind of help with just to letting people know about your debut comedy album, Off White. Again, folks, it's on your favorite streaming platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple, iHeart, whatever it is out there. Go check it out. It's her debut comedy album. Funny stuff. I really appreciated it. And Kat, I just got to tell you, thank you so much for your vulnerability here on the show. We were touching on the album, but we also were able to delve into some a little deeper topics in there, especially
Hmm.
towards the end. And we really appreciate that because we know that as artists, we do use our artistry, our creativity sometimes to really heal. That's really
Hmm.
what happens a lot of times. And just you kind of talking about that, it really kind of drove home the point as to why creativity is so important for so many people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here promoting the album. It was a lot of hard work, and I'm excited to share it with the world.
Fantastic. Once again, Cat Alvarado, her debut comedy album Off White was released on May 26th. Go check it out, y'all. My name is Rodrigo Bravo Jr., co-hosting here, filling in for Tony Diaz. We really appreciate your support. Feel free to check us out on all of our platforms. As you know, this will come out on the podcast, and it will come out later on our FM broadcast on our first platform, 90.1 KPFT FM. With that said, hope everybody has an incredible evening. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Take care. Bye, y'all.
Bye.